All right, hello. Welcome back. Chase Thomas Podcast, taping this on a Tuesday afternoon. First timer, one of my all-time favorite NFL writers is here. It's wild. No, you're not watching the Peter King podcast, but you should if you're not already. No, you're not watching Football Night in America. No, you're not watching the Dan Patrick Show. No, you're watching the Chase Thomas Podcast with Peter King. Peter, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Hey, good to be on with you, Chase. I'm doing well. Thank you.
My first question for you, Peter. Hardest column for you to put together this season thus far has been which one?
Well, I'm going to tell you what the easiest column for me to put up or to put together, but it was difficult just to come to the conclusion that it had to be written. And that was the column where I excoriated Jimmy and D Haslam for trading for and signing Deshaun Watson to a ironclad $230 million guaranteed contract. And I thought it was a terrible message to send before you even knew everything about that story. And I didn't think that it was remotely appropriate to be making a decision like that for your franchise. Now, I understand exactly why they did it. They weren't getting Deshaun Watson to come to Cleveland if they did not fully guarantee that contract, period. It's obvious. So then I wouldn't have signed him. And so it was an easy column to write, but it probably took me 3 days going back and forth, or 2 days, going back and forth and writing and making sure that I really worded it exactly the way I wanted it to be. But I would say that to me was the most notable column, just from the standpoint that sometimes you have to go out on a little bit of a ledge in this business and write the very hard truth.
Do you enjoy writing just as much as you did when you first started?
I would say probably not as much. It has to do with the fact that when I was getting started in this business, I got my first sports writing job. I was 22 years old at the Cincinnati Enquirer. And every day when I woke up, I felt like I was the luckiest man on the face of the earth. Can you believe it that this sports staff with these incredible writers on it, that they want me to work there? And so it isn't that I don't like my job. I absolutely love my job, but I don't think anything can quite match the idealism, the love of the game, basically, that you have when you first get into this business. I mean, and in those days, it was so different. At one point when I was there, I was the backup beat writer on the Cincinnati Reds. It was the end of their great dynasty. And one day I was in St. Louis covering the team on a road trip. It was at the old Busch Stadium, and across the street there was a Marriott hotel. And I was in the lobby, and Johnny Bench, the Hall of Fame catcher, saw me. And he literally said, "Hey, kid, what are you doing tomorrow morning?" And I said, "Nothing." He goes, "Want to come out and shag for us? We're going to take extra hitting at 10 o'clock. I said, "Yeah." So I went out, and for 2 hours on a broiling hot July, I think it was July day, I shagged baseballs all over the outfield with Johnny Bench and a couple of young guys on the Reds hitting. And that was so, I mean, look, I was a kid who grew up loving baseball. So that's a day, honestly, I'll never forget. And so it was, I've had a lot of fun over the years in this job.
Do you still prefer baseball over football?
Well, in some ways, yes, because baseball is my leisure.
Yeah.
Football is my job.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I went to a World Series game last week in Philadelphia,
Mm-hmm.
and I go to a World Series game almost every year. And it's just one of those days that I really look forward to because it's in the
Mm-hmm.
middle of the football season. And on the day that I go to a World Series game, all I have to think of is keeping a pristine scorecard because I keep scoring every game I go to.
I love
So
it.
that is really enjoyable to me. I love baseball, but I love football too.
Um, do you have the same writing process that you follow a day every day? Do you have something where you're like with your office, you have to be starting at a certain time, certain thing to drink, certain habits that you have that you stick to?
Well, what I write now, because over the last 4 years, I'm only responsible for one thing every week, and that's
Mm,
my Football Morning in America column that comes out every Monday. It's about 10 to 12,000 words every week. So it's not something you just do in one day.
mhm.
And my process essentially is that I try to do the non-deadline, non-football things, really try to get that done by end of day Friday. Myron Cope, the old Pittsburgh broadcaster, had this little habit that he used to call collecting shirt pocket notes.
Hmm.
And what he did was anytime he heard something or he thought of something, he would write it on a piece of paper and put it in his shirt pocket. Well, in these days, it's a little bit different. I take this thing, and every day, for those who were just listening, not watching, I'm holding up my iPhone
Mhm.
and I take notes on my iPhone, and I just kind of wake up on maybe Thursday afternoon or at the latest by Friday morning and say, okay, got to get to work now and sort of download my brain and start writing some stuff for the column that isn't going to be deadliney Sunday stuff.
Mhm.
So I try to get that done end of day Friday or at the absolute latest by Saturday morning. And then I pretty much just concentrate. I make a bunch of calls on Saturday to take the temperature of some things that are going on around the league. Um, then I put on the Red Zone channel on Sunday and one other game that I'll want to keep concentrating on in that early 1 o'clock Eastern time window. And I'll just watch for 3 hours and I'll try to make sure that I take a bunch of notes and then in middle of the fourth quarter, I'll make 4 or 5 phone calls to PR guys, or I will just text coaches or players who I know I want to talk to after the game. And this past weekend, I texted the PR guy of the Jets, said I really like to get Robert Saleh. I ended up getting him. I got the Vikings to get me Kirk Cousins. I got that young kid who caught Brady's touchdown pass, Cade Otton, his first touchdown pass, Brady's 720th. And then I got Dan Campbell of the Lions. So, I mean, I try to watch the games and I always try to think, what will people be talking about Monday morning? I want to write something at the top of my column every Monday that a football fan in Laredo, Texas, or Kankakee, Illinois, Bainbridge Island, Washington, Portland, Maine, Bethany Beach, Delaware, that any of those people will say, "Oh yeah, I want to read some more about what in the world are the Jets doing? Are they actually any good?" So that's what I try to ask myself as I'm watching the games on Sunday.
Do you think it's good for the NFL to have a super active NFL trade deadline that we saw this year? Do you think that would be good for that to be the new norm, kind of like what the NBA is and Major League Baseball, where a lot of big name players are moved, and maybe next year you see a big time quarterback move midseason? Do you think that's something the NFL should want?
I think the NFL should want it. The NFL definitely does want it. There's a guy who was the longtime vice president of communications for the NFL. He's retired now. His name is Joe Brown. And
Mhm.
in the 80s, he became very kind of jealous of baseball because baseball had a hot stove league in the off season. And what that
Mhm.
means is that even when baseball ended, for 2 months, everybody was talking about it. Hey, who are the Yankees going to trade for? Who are the Braves going to trade for? Who's Texas going to sign in free agency? So there was always something happening. And the NFL really has imitated that. The NFL has made big news out of everything now. The
Mhm.
trading deadline, 3 full days of the draft, the release of the schedule is a big story. And the combine has become a mega story. The start of free agency has become a big story. So the NFL basically has said to the sports world, no time is dead time on the NFL calendar. It's a little bit exhausting sometimes, but knowing that there's really only about 6 or 7 weeks every year that there's truly nothing going on from about June 5th, July 20th, when there's really nothing going on. But the NFL has created a monster and they've gotten the media to cover it.
What happens with Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi the rest of the way?
Can you repeat that, Chase?
What happens with Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi the rest of the way?
Good question. Very good question. Bill Belichick is going to play the guy he thinks gives him the best chance to win. And I know that sounds like a cliche, but he's truly the only coach who behaves that way in the
Mhm.
NFL, the only one. Could you ever see John Harbaugh benching Lamar Jackson? I can't see it. I
Mm.
mean, unless something really, really weird happens. I'm not saying that John Harbaugh doesn't have the guts to make a tough decision. Don't get me wrong. But what I am saying is that Bill Belichick lives by that credo, by that ethos. And if Mac Jones struggles, he's going to put Zappe in the game. I think Bailey Zappe is a very, very interesting story from the standpoint that it looks like he came out of nowhere,
Mhm.
right? Fourth round pick out of Western Kentucky. But anybody at any level of football who's thrown 64 touchdown passes in 1 year, anybody, I don't care what level it is, uh, that is going to get respect from people in the business. And that got Bill Belichick's attention. And I fully believe that Belichick is going to not be afraid if he has to. Mac Jones has not played well this year, period. You can't look back at many great moments that he's had. And Bill Belichick doesn't know whether Bailey Zappi is the guy. But I do think I will not be surprised if one of these games he just calls for Zappi and benches Jones, and who knows for how long.
I'm curious with the way Bill Belichick is wired, where something you hear about a lot of folks who grinded and grinded and grinded, and then they get to the top. They talk about missing the daily grind. They miss the building aspect of it. They miss what it was. It kind of speaks to what you were talking about when you were first getting into the business, and just that eagerness and just the feeling. You're like you're at the start of something. You were. It was just so cool to always be around this thing and this thing you always wanted to do, and there's just so much energy. Do you think Belichick has looked at the post Tom Brady years fondly, where like he's energized, he's hit this other when people are like, oh, is he going to walk away? It's like, no, he gets to do this thing that he gets to start over. He was just contending year over year, and he had already built the juggernaut. He has to now redo it. Do you think he finds more? Maybe joy is not the right way of looking at it, but do you think he's wired the way where it's more fun for him to go to the office now? Because he's like, this is hard. I've got to really work this out. This is hard for me to beat
I
Josh
think
Allen
you've
Mills.
you have you know you've discovered the seeds of Bill Belichick's greatness.
Mhm.
He loves the little crap that probably a lot of people are sick of. He loves it.
Mhm.
Um, Chris Sims of NBC, who worked for the Patriots, I think for like 16 months when he got out of football and was trying to figure out what he wanted to do. He was offensive quality control guy. And he told me a story once that it was Mother's Day weekend, and Bill didn't even realize that it was Mother's Day weekend. And at one point, guys on his team, because he told everybody, well, here's what we're doing this weekend, blah, blah, blah. And somebody said, hey, Bill, Sunday's Mother's Day. We gotta take our wives out or whatever. He said, oh, geez, I'm sorry. And he obviously gave everybody Mother's Day off. But I only bring up that story because not to say, oh, he's either shut off from the rest of the world, which honestly most football coaches are. But Sims has a very interesting way of looking at Belichick, and that is, he said that he has the exact same attitude, approach, ethos on May 11 as he would have on October 11. He could be playing the biggest game of his year, and there would be nothing that would look any different. Now, Chase, I want you to think back, okay? I want you to think back to when you were however old you were, that New England was playing Seattle in the Super Bowl, okay? And do you remember toward the end of the game, in the last minute and a half of the game, that the Seattle was down at the 1.5 yard line and the clock was running? And everybody is saying, Bill, they're going to score a touchdown. You got to start calling your timeouts. You want to give Brady some time after they score. You've got to be aware of the scoreboard. Belichick just stood there, just letting the clock go. And everybody, I remember I was in the press box. I'm saying, what is Belichick doing? Turns out he knew exactly what he was doing. And what he was doing is he was turning the tables on the Seahawks, putting the pressure on them, making them hurry, because the Seahawks were sure that he was going to use his timeouts. So the Seahawks kind of hurried, and Russell Wilson throws the interception to Malcolm Butler. And it literally, his approach won a Super Bowl for the Patriots. But a friend of mine who at the time worked for the Patriots said to me in that offseason, he goes, if there was a heart monitor attached to Bill Belichick at that moment, I would bet you it's that his heart was beating at the exact same beats per minute as if he was on vacation in Nantucket in the offseason. Because to him, this is just what I do. This is what I do. And so I think, honestly, when I think of Belichick, I think of a guy who is such a flatliner that he enjoys every aspect of the football world.
I like it. Peter King, this has been fantastic. I greatly appreciate you making the time today. We can read you over on NBC Sports with your Football Morning in America column, which is fantastic. Read it every Monday morning on NBC Sports, Pro Football Talk with Mike Florio and company. Anything else you'd like to plug as we wrap up here this afternoon, Peter?
No, I'd like to plug the Chase Thomas podcast. Listen to Chase Thomas. You'll be a smarter sports fan and obviously a much better human being.
Thank you, Peter. That was amazing. I appreciate it.
All right. Hey, listen, great being on with you, Chase. Take care of yourself.
Thank you. We'll have to do this again soon.
No problem. Call.